Jiche morto dan hingmi jang, lonar monum jembor ngam jabdang, bakar dangam santo shirmar, tumba to je janla ki sham sar. Chima me petra per me ba, jahor marig ba, chapi chapa chirtran korwa nadanda gang, te chato, simchan tamchi ji na chirtawar ko na kyang te, chato nam simchan tamchi na tang charar kirwa te na ko na kyang chong. Te jibshir jinan jahur shanchu sankhun kurna nepa na semchin te nadnan kurla nepa go. Semchin tamchin natang charu kirna te ne shanchu sankhwa yang nad meparin yoro jahur ndirta te khurna tsongkhun gi wakchik nawa na. Navar kirwa na te navi shir pama ni kyang navarin yoro chachit wakchik ba te nad mepar ma kirwa te chit pama ni kyang dunghar varin yir te jahur te vijinda shanchu sankhwa chimba tamchit wakchik ba vijinda Rdugba yende semchin tamchin nawe te navarin yir semchin nad mepe teyang nad mepa go kang jahur nadnda chile shongji zirwa lab shanchu sankhwa namki nanda nyarji chimbo le njong jahur jir me ba kimda kyo ki kimda tong na kyo lao yo ga yang mettam me ba jahur sanki ki jang tamchi kyang tong o me ba jir tong o me ba tong ba ni jir tong o me ba tong ba nyan la tong ba jiji ker tong jiji yoda me ba kundar tok ba nar tong ba ni jir tong ba wo kundar tok ba nar tong ba ni jir tong ba wo tong ba nyat kundar tak bar ni sama yongsur tok ba te yang tong ba te tong ba nyan nar tong ba nyan la mar tok ko me ba kyam dak tong ba nyat kang dap zar me ba Jahor Tumbanyan of Tavern Jerva Teacher Sani Le Psar Lo, Meba, Tower Jerva Teacher Sani Kan Le Psar, Meba, Devjan Soba Namji, number Trura Le Psar Lo, Meba, Devjan Sobi, number Trura Kan Le Psar, Meba, Simchan Tamchiti, Simdam Shopale, Psar Lo, Jahor Kan Chula, Yogyan, Metam Zervana, the Tamchetan, Petir Gora Tamchan, Ku, Yoyano, Tichir Jena, the Namnan Kurvi. Ngakbir mawar ten Koran shanchu sankhwe yokko pekir korwar nam nartawar kirwar namji ngakbar mawar te shanchu sankhwa nartawar kirwar tamchilam gyo wago tewe na ta tamchi kyan pekir korwar tamchil no ko yokko jahur jirme ba kyamdag kyoki natba chenra nat chenra me ba zigme chang tanda me to me ba nat tele lidang dan nam gunde semdang dan me ba li wenbe li dang damba yang mayan sim jimi chuni de yin sim jimi chuni be sem dang mardan no me ba kyam dang dartar te si kam dang chi kam dang me kam dang lung kam dang kam de jele kam kang no per jer me ba ja per sem jan tam chi ki na ki kam te ta kang yin ba te no ko yang na go
Next, let us begin the teaching on the Vimalakirti Sutra. After we finish reciting the King of Aspiration prayer in a moment, I would like those present here to stay for a little longer. There are a few matters I need to convey to you. To liberate sentient beings, please generate the Supreme Bodhicitta before we start today's teaching. Today we will continue with our study of the Vimalakirti Sutra. As I mentioned yesterday, everyone should maintain a joyful and respectful state of mind. This respect should be directed toward the Dharma, not toward me personally. It is vital to have respect for the Dharma while listening to and receiving these teachings. This attitude is very important. Generally speaking, our group of listeners is relatively proper in how they receive the Dharma, and everyone has shown great persistence. Regardless of which sutra we have covered in the past, everyone has been listening earnestly, studying hard, and trying to understand the meaning of the Dharma. You are also doing your best to put these teachings into practice. However, there is a certain portion of so-called Buddhists. Among those who study the Dharma with me now, the total number of students is actually quite large. But as for those who truly enjoy the process of study and reflection, the percentage of people who can be said to attend class consistently over the long term is perhaps less than 10%. It is likely less than 10% of the total. 90% of them do not actually attend the classes. Although we consider our activities here as formal study, a significant number of people may have nominally signed up to study some aspects of the Dharma. But in reality, if they have no interest in attending public classes like this, then for our more private courses intended for management, the situation might be even worse. So taking everything into account, only a small portion of Buddhists are genuinely engaged in study and reflection, and that smaller group is fairly stable. However, the majority of people, including those associated with me from what I observe on Weibo or within various WeChat groups, or among the Dharma friends in the study association whom I follow from time to time, the total headcount is relatively large. But regarding the proportion of long-term learners, I am very unsatisfied with the overall ratio. So within the context of the entire Buddhist community, I am not making comments about other specific groups. As for other so-called Buddhists or disciples of various teachers, I am not very clear about the actual state of their study and reflection. By all logic, some domestic Dharma friends have been studying and reflecting for a long time. But in terms of sheer numbers, looking at how many Buddhists actually complete their studies or the number of people studying with us on a regular basis, the result is quite regrettable. Perhaps for our present group, such a wonderful opportunity as this may not always be available in the future. I spoke about the internal and external conditions a few years ago as well. No matter how you look at it, the Dharma is truly difficult to encounter and hear. Perhaps you sense this, or perhaps you feel it does not matter. But in any case, no matter how busy I am, or if I am feeling unwell, or if there are various miscellaneous matters to attend to, I have always been doing my best and making a consistent effort. Of course, if a time comes in the future when such conditions no longer exist, I will personally have no regrets whatsoever. But the Dharma is truly precious. Some people seem to just sign up for the sake of signing up. They just want to obtain a refuge certificate. They just run from one teacher to another without stability. They are what we call running practitioners. As for the genuine Buddhist view meditation, conduct and result, they have not studied even a single complete treatise. Perhaps they have never received a complete transmission from beginning to end. People's minds today are very restless and unstable. Furthermore, their wisdom is relatively shallow. Perhaps what I am saying today sounds a bit negative. However, I have been observing this situation continuously. Since last year, while we do have some truly genuine listeners, whether you look at the overall numbers or the entire community of Buddhists, the situation is truly not optimistic. Of course, most of the listeners gathered here today have been persisting steadily throughout. I am very satisfied with some of you. No matter the circumstances, especially when I am not at Larungar, as you all know, some people may have to listen at 2 or 3 in the morning. This is because our local time cannot match all different time zones. In those cases, it must be extremely tiring for them. Yet they have persisted all along. They have never once missed a single class. There are indeed quite a few people like this. But looking at the overall interest that Buddhists have in study and reflection, this is how I see it. I'm not entirely sure how others perceive it. This may be due to what is called the degenerate age, or simply the conditions of our current era. In the future, these conditions will not necessarily continue to improve. Looking at various indicators, especially when considering the overall global situation today, whether in terms of economics, faith, or even basic cooperation between people, many aspects are not very optimistic. Those who do not follow the news may not be especially aware. But for those who do follow current events, very many extremely complex global problems are constantly emerging. And the overall global situation may also be extremely bad right now. In times like these, we as Buddhists still inhabit this planet after all. The whole world has now become what is called a global village. All places are mutually interdependent. Everyone is affected to varying degrees. At this time, even if our personal practice as Buddhists is very complete, if we simply continue our study, reflection, and practice as always, this may not necessarily be enough to guarantee success. So I am also letting everyone know this in advance today. Tomorrow is the Buddha's day of descent from the heaven. I hope that in every location you will all wholeheartedly generate aspirations from morning until evening. Please focus on generating bodhicitta. The most important thing is to generate bodhicitta. At the same time, try your best to practice wholesome dharmas. There are, of course, many different ways to practice wholesome dharmas. So this is the second time I am announcing this and reporting to you all. I hope that when you encounter these special days, you will be even more diligent in your efforts. Of course, some of our volunteers may be busy with various duties, but that is perfectly fine. Reciting mantras quietly should be possible in most volunteer positions. This should not be much of an obstacle to your work. So I hope that since you are Buddhists after all, you will remember that a Buddhist has a specific kind of conduct. We have our own kind of aspiration. We have our own kind of learning. These qualities should be perfected through various means. That is roughly what I wanted to say first. Next, today we continue with the 5th chapter of the Vimalakirti Sutra. Yesterday, Manjushri entered the house on the commission of the Buddha. Manjushri Bodhisattva, along with his very vast retinue, arrived together at the place of the retired scholar Vimalakirti. He saw the room was empty, with nothing and no one in it. Vimalakirti was lying alone on a single couch. At this point, Manjushri Bodhisattva had already arrived. After Manjushri Bodhisattva arrived, they had a dialogue. He asked the retired scholar Vimalakirti, "Retired scholar, can this illness be forborne? In its treatment, is it diminished so as not to increase? Has your illness lessened? The world-honored one has made immeasurable courteous inquiries about you. He sends you countless inquiries, including questions about your recent health and well-being." This content is partly found in the Tang translation. Then immediately after, Manjushri Bodhisattva asked his own questions. He asked, "Retired scholar, what is the cause from which this illness arises? What are the conditions that brought about this illness? Has it been affecting you long? How will it be extinguished?" There were roughly 3 questions raised yesterday. Since those questions were raised, we will look at the answers today. In giving his response today, Vimalakirti said to Manjushri Bodhisattva, he actually speaks first about when his illness began and when the illness will be over. He explains it from these 2 aspects. The first question about the cause of the illness is explained in more detail below. So, although there are various methods of explanation found in different commentaries, certain ancient commentaries do indeed explain it this way. Therefore, I would like to discuss this with you all. We do not know the exact state of everyone's study. Looking at the tutoring of the very few people here every evening, most of them place a high importance on it. However, I have not heard if anyone is comparing several commentaries and translated versions of the Vimalakirti Sutra together. I am not sure if that kind of comparative study is happening. I am not entirely clear on that. If you are truly interested in learning in the past when we were engaged in study and reflection, regardless of which Dharma was being taught, we would first gather a large amount of reference materials. We would try our best to see how different great masters explained it. We would consider how to explain it through our own wisdom, and look at how relevant Dharma masters and tutors explain it. We would study everything very earnestly and thoroughly. That was how things were done in the past. But now, because this era is somewhat unique, I'm not entirely sure how people are studying. In reality, we should combine different explanations with our own wisdom and the teachings of our lineage masters. By combining these elements, we should be able to penetrate the intended meaning of the Vimalakirti Sutra. I often think about this. In a degenerate age like the one we live in now, to be able to truly penetrate or even just have a general understanding of such a sutra is actually a great honor. Within one's lifetime, having the opportunity to study such a Mahayana sutra and gaining a basic understanding of its content is something I find extremely rare and precious. First, let me explain something. Regarding the answer given by the retired scholar Vimalakirti, he asks, "When did my illness begin?" Vimalakirti said, "From stupidity there is affection. Since there is stupidity, there is affection for existence." Existence here refers to the 3 realms of existence, meaning the love for these realms. This involves what we often call craving, grasping, and becoming. These conditions are part of the 12 links of dependent origination. This includes the entire wheel of dependent origination, starting from ignorance and ending with old age and death. The wheel of dependent origination is a continuous, endless cycle. The point is that for me and for all sentient beings, ignorance and stupidity first arose. With the arising of ignorance and stupidity, there also came consciousness and grasping. Then craving appeared. Once craving arose, we began to create karma. Following that is the cycle of birth and death. Because this cycle of birth and death exists, we sentient beings all face birth, old age, illness, and death. So my illness began from the moment stupidity arose. He did not say that he was ill because he ate poorly a few days ago, or because he caught a cold while being outside, or even because he caught an infection from someone. When an ordinary worldly person falls ill, it is usually due to a temporary imbalance of the 4 elements. These are viewed as the contributing conditions. However, the illness of the retired scholar Vimalakirti is described in a very special way. His falling ill is unique. Since all sentient beings are ill, therefore I am ill. The reason for his illness is partly the ignorance found in the 12 links of dependent origination. Additionally, all sentient beings in the three realms suffer from various different afflictions and illnesses. It is precisely because of this that I am ill. It is not because my own four elements are out of balance, or because I could not sleep well at night, or because I did not dress warmly enough, or because I ate too much or too little. It is not like that. Because sentient beings are ill, I am ill. So when will this illness be cured? If the illness of all sentient beings were extinguished, then my illness would be extinguished. As for the earlier questions about when the illness began and when it would end, regarding its conclusion, if the illness of sentient beings lessens or is extinguished, then my own illness will show improvement. Eventually it will even reach a complete recovery. Some commentaries on the Vimalakirti Sutra have also noted that a bodhisattva's illness differs from that of sentient beings in three ways. These are the three aspects: the cause, the result, and the condition of the illness. For example, what is the cause of illness for sentient beings? It is ignorance and affliction. And what is the result of their illness? It is the five aggregates: form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. Then there is the condition of the illness, meaning its state or situation. Symptoms like headaches or foot pain. So these are the cause, result, and condition of a sentient being's illness. But what is the cause of a bodhisattva's illness? The illness of bodhisattvas arises from great compassion. What is the result of their illness? It is manifesting various phantasms in the world. Because bodhisattvas have great compassion, they appear before sentient beings. And what is the condition of their illness? The condition of their illness is the same as that of sentient beings. They also experience headaches, foot pain, and so on. So sometimes we may find it difficult to tell the difference between a sentient being falling ill and a bodhisattva falling ill. By analyzing the condition of the illness alone, one might not be able to fully understand the situation. Sentient beings certainly suffer from headaches, foot pain, and other symptoms. They feel the actual pain of being ill. As for bodhisattvas, while they are among us sentient beings, they likewise manifest symptoms like headaches and foot pain. We should understand the reason for this. Sometimes it is impossible to distinguish between the two based on appearance alone. Therefore, we should gain a clear understanding here. The illness of the retired scholar Vimalakirti is actually quite different from the illnesses sentient beings experience. We often see that when sentient beings fall ill, they can look very pitiful. And when a bodhisattva falling ill, it looks very similar to the illness of a sentient being. There is a scriptural citation for this. The Maharatnakuta Sutra says, "Illness can destroy vitality, seize and plunder our courageous mind, ruin the cluster of our senses, leaving us frail and without support." This means that what we call illness can destroy our strength and vitality. It can also destroy or seize and plunder our courageous mind. Even our sense faculties can be ruined by it. Much of our power and influence will be diminished. In the end, it leaves one without support. We all know that whether it is a bodhisattva in manifestation or an actual ordinary being, once they fall ill, they are left entirely without capacity. Just as the words of my perfect teacher says, when sentient beings fall ill, they are like a small bird struck by a stone. They lose all of their ability and power. This is what is meant by the condition of illness. Of course, regarding the retired scholar Vimalakirti, was his illness exactly the same as the physical pain felt by ordinary beings? That is not entirely clear. However, from the perspective of appearance, so many people in Vaishal went to visit him at that time, and he was indeed lying on a sickbed. In appearance, it likely has something in common with when an ordinary being falls ill. This is what we discussed earlier regarding the nature of being ill. Then it says below why. Bodhisattvas enter samsara on behalf of sentient beings. Because there is samsara, there is illness. If sentient beings were able to transcend illness, then bodhisattvas would not also be ill. He explains here what is the reason for this. Because the bodhisattva, for the sake of liberating sentient beings, even though he has no afflictions and no ignorance, still manifests himself before beings. He also enters into our cycle of birth and death. By entering birth and death, there will certainly be illness. If sentient beings have transcended this illness, then as a bodhisattva, he will also have no illness. So, the illness of a bodhisattva is in reality the illness of sentient beings. If sentient beings appear to have illness and suffering, then the Bodhisattva will indeed also appear to have illness. In some accounts of our teacher, His Holiness, Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, of course, for those who did not know His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok personally, they might not necessarily think he was a Bodhisattva. If someone was not around him, perhaps his merit and his supramundane capacity might not have been entirely clear to them. So those not by his side might not think so. But we are not just saying this because we are his students or lineage disciples. It is not that because of this I would intentionally praise him and pay him reverence. That is not the case. Relying on a true power and invisible force, we recognize him as a great bodhisattva sincerely from the heart. What is the reason for this? One reason is his conduct and actions. He fully possessed the characteristics of bodhisattvas described in Mahayana sutras and treatises. The second aspect is his blessing and the power of his teaching of the Dharma. These caused the mind streams of countless people to give rise to genuine and authentic bodhicitta. At the very least, others were able to generate a semblance of bodhicitta. And there are many other factors. We truly feel that in the present era, he was a great bodhisattva who came to this world. After turning the Dharma wheel for a period of time, he freely departed to a pure land. In his manifestation, indeed, upon seeing the illnesses of sentient beings and their suffering, he often accepted their illnesses by the practice of exchanging self and other. This included His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok's heart disease. Regarding that, because His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok had heart issues, at that time a heart disease was actually spreading severely in the local area. For this reason, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok truly accepted it. In his manifestation, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok was in great pain after accepting it. This is recorded in the Tibetan text of the biography Always Remembering. However, when translating into Chinese later, some people felt that this might make it seem as if His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok had real self-afflictions. So the word pain was removed from the Chinese version. Last year, when it was translated into English, it seems Western readers actually preferred it. Using the phrase extremely painful gives a sense of immersion. It points to something concrete and real. The mention of pain is actually quite good. If even His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok feels pain, then we certainly will too. They felt it must be included. So, in the teachings in our book, Always Remembering, there are stories like this about His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok. In reality, when sentient beings fall ill, some bodhisattvas accept it through the practice of exchanging self and other. For example, we often saw that when young monks would throw stones at stray dogs, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok would often visibly show pain. Among our senior disciples, everyone knows the fact in our hearts. I do not need to explain it further here. In any case, a truly genuine bodhisattva dwells in this world by relying on compassion. At the same time, they take on the karma of many sentient beings. As the Mahayana Samgraha Sastra states, the suffering of birth and death is long. One should enter nirvana. But with the power of great compassion, one dwells long and does not abandon. These bodhisattvas are completely capable of entering nirvana themselves. But since they see these beings as extremely pitiful, when a great bodhisattva dwells in a world, the weapons, warfare, and famines in that place, along with various inauspicious events, naturally subside. Therefore, the bodhisattva appears to be ill. If the illness and karma of sentient beings diminish, then the bodhisattva will also have no illness. So the illness of bodhisattvas in different places is actually connected to the state of sentient beings. As we have discussed before regarding certain great masters, some of them are indeed the reincarnations of bodhisattvas. They are truly remarkable. However, in other cases, their disciples might simply praise them excessively, and gradually they become known as a bodhisattva. Whether they are truly a bodhisattva is sometimes questionable. In any case, a genuine bodhisattva has mastery over birth and death. Now, there is a metaphor provided in the text. Suppose there is an elder who has only one son. This child becomes very seriously ill. At that time, the parents also feel very low. Perhaps their bodies fall ill and their minds suffer too. When their only child, their only son, is in the hospital and is very seriously ill, the parents are like sick people themselves, even if they aren't ill, because they are so heartbroken. If the child recovers from the illness, the parents also recover naturally. By the same reasoning as the saying goes, a mother's heart is like water, while a child's heart is like stone. The heart of a parent is very fragile. It is very easily moved. In contrast, a child's heart is like a stone, which is harder and not as easily moved. This is a natural law in our world. For all parents, no matter what happens, as stated in the words of my perfect teacher, when a child is ill, many parents would rather be the ones who are ill. They can bear being ill themselves, but when their child is sick, their hearts are especially heartbroken. By the same reasoning, bodhisattvas are exactly the same. Bodhisattvas have affection for sentient beings as if for their own children. They are just like the parents of an only child. When sentient beings are ill, the bodhisattvas are ill also. When sentient beings recover from their illness, the bodhisattvas recover also. This metaphor is quite important. Sometimes whether a bodhisattva is in a good mood or in good physical and mental health is related to the karma and the situation of sentient beings. For a truly genuine bodhisattva, this is naturally the case. Even if we have only generated a semblance of bodhicitta, when we see those who are suffering, we sometimes feel emotionally distressed ourselves. All of us here often encounter people who are in a very pitiful state. Especially when visiting places that are in a very bad condition, some people truly feel a great deal of pain in their hearts. Not long ago, when we went to Africa, during our trip there, I realized I don't have truly authentic bodhicitta and don't count for much. However, because I have studied Mahayana Buddhism, when I eventually arrived in some very remote areas, I saw the famines there, the extreme scarcity of food, the outbreaks of war, the spread of diseases, and the various backward customs born of ignorance that were constantly emerging. In such places, I truly wished I could do something to help them. But there was often no way to help. It constantly reminded me of the story of an armless mother whose only son was being swept away by a river. She was powerless and there was nothing she could do. One truly thinks of things like this often. Sometimes even if you want to act, you simply can't. In some cases, even your own safety might be at risk. Sometimes acting out of a good heart is actually not that simple. Mipham Rinpoche often said that when benefiting sentient beings, one needs skillful wisdom. Without that skillful wisdom, your good intentions might eventually become a great source of vexation. Such things happen quite often in our world. Take, for example, Angela Merkel in Germany. We visited those regions before. At the time, I truly rejoiced in her aspirations, or aspiration as we say in Buddhism. Back then, many European countries simply refused to accept refugees. They then began to take them in, some saying it was out of compassion and others saying it was for humanitarian reasons. In any case, Germany has already accepted over 1 million refugees. But after accepting them, it has become a challenge not just for Germany, but for all of Europe. Whether regarding security, sanitation, or environmental protection, and even in terms of infectious diseases and religious influence, many problems have emerged in various respects. At this time, we sometimes observe that while we may start with good intentions, for example, some people keep a pet with the best of intentions or try to help those around them out of kindness. In the end, this compassionate mind often gets struck down by the harsh realities of life. Of course, regarding the issues I just mentioned, they do not necessarily possess the authentic compassion of Mahayana Buddhism. But indeed, back in the beginning, around the year 2013, I visited some of these places. At that time, I thought to myself, well, why don't we accept these refugees, the sentient beings in these war regions? Hearing that millions of people are left homeless at that time, I also spoke about this in various talks. I believed humanity on this earth should help them to the best of their ability. But looking at the situation now, whether it is the Brexit issue in Britain or the problems Germany faces after accepting refugees, previously these European countries were like a paradise. They were extremely safe. But now many problems still persist. Of course, I am not here to analyze politics. I have no interest in that area. However, sometimes when Mahayana Buddhist teachings are combined with certain humanistic ideas in modern society, many issues can still arise. At the same time, for us Mahayana Buddhists, what began as a very good and wholesome intention can sometimes bring about many hidden dangers for oneself. For example, some of our Dharma friends initially welcomed a new Dharma friend with great enthusiasm. "You are so pitiful, please come and stay at my home." Then after some time they found themselves filled with great vexation. And perhaps in the end they even came to regret it. This does happen. Well, I will speak a bit more slowly today. Yesterday, people said I was speaking too fast without even drinking water. So they were a little unhappy with me. I have had some water now. This passage also mentions that when sentient beings are cured, the Bodhisattva is cured. When sentient beings are ill or experiencing suffering, the Bodhisattva also appears to be ill. The layman Vimalakirti continues by saying he goes on to discuss the matter of his illness. From this point, he addresses the question of when the illness will be cured. Then, regarding the cause of the illness, which was asked earlier, what is the cause from which this illness arises? Regarding the cause, from what cause does this illness arise? He says, the illness of Bodhisattvas arises from great compassion. He explains that the cause of his illness is simply because he has too much great compassion. In the Tibetan version, it says, I feel this sentence is one I have used in other contexts before. The illness of all bodhisattvas arises from great compassion. This statement is very profound. Ordinarily, we might think of someone as a bodhisattva. We often hold them in that regard. But when they fall ill, we might think, oh, this teacher or bodhisattva is so pitiful. They are so ill, I feel so sorry for them. But in reality, as I mentioned, if they are truly a genuine bodhisattva, they do not necessarily experience self-affliction. It is often explained in the sutras and treatises that a bodhisattva's illness can be a manifestation. By appearing to be ill in this way, many people might gain a new understanding of birth, old age, illness, and death. Furthermore, because of their illness, others might perform good deeds, such as releasing animals. This also serves as a meaningful condition. In some cases, a bodhisattva's illness may serve to eliminate the negative karma of both themselves and others. It might address famines or widespread diseases. Through their own experience of illness, they are able to dispel the suffering of sentient beings. There is a deeper intention behind it. Such manifestations of illness by a bodhisattva actually serve to clear away obstacles and adversities. Tantric mantra treatises often explain that for truly genuine bodhisattvas, even an ordinary illness can appear as something extremely special or painful, even seemingly cruel to an outside observer. We have an old saying about this in our region. A certain great master was in immense pain while ill, to the point of crying out loudly. But it was later understood that through this, many demonic forces and local obstacles were cleared away. While this may be how devotees interpret it, the truth is that for genuine masters, when we read their biographies, we find that their experience of illness or death can seem even more painful or pitiful than that of an ordinary person. But in reality, through this conduct, they bring joy to countless sentient beings. This is just like the story of Master Silabhadra we discussed yesterday. At that time, his pain was also extremely difficult to endure. He even frequently considered taking his own life. Therefore, when we fall ill, including every one of us here today, I believe everyone will experience illness at some point. Finding someone who has never been sick is generally quite rare, as it is only a matter of time for everyone. So, as the Venerable Potowa said, when we fall ill, we should think, what should be ill is ill, and what should die has died. Everyone should keep these two sentences in mind. If a hospital issues a notice of critical condition indicating you might only have a month or two left to live, then you can calmly say, what should die has died. This seems to be quite difficult for many people. Those with realized practice might be able to say this with composure. However, those without such realization might plead, Doctor, please, is there any way to save me? Give me some medicine or let us recite some sutras. Is there any chance for me to remain in this world? Many people think this way. While we should prepare ourselves with these pith instructions, we must still maintain a deep respect for life. It is not that we should disregard or trample upon life at any time. Thinking, if I must die, I die, does not mean refusing medical treatment. That is not the correct attitude. Such an attitude would also be an extreme. Some practitioners feel they have no interest in this human world. They might think, when will I die? Dying would be even better. This kind of thinking is also mistaken. For those who practice goodness, living even one more day allows for the growth of wholesome roots. This is consistent with the teachings in the 400 stanzas on the middle way. Therefore, as upholders of discipline and practitioners of goodness, we should still do our best by relying on various medical treatments, health practices, exercise, and the recitation of mantras. We can also practice longevity methods and consume the various healthy foods available in our world. However, some people nowadays might consume too many health foods. Whether these foods actually lead to health is hard to say. This is healthy. This is a green plant. This is such and such. It is difficult to determine if some of these truly improve one's health. Nevertheless, many of us indeed need to exercise, perform full prostrations, and maintain regularity in our eating, sleeping, and daily words and actions. One's conduct is also a reflection of one's mental state. Most importantly, one should maintain a peaceful state of mind. In this way, one may attain longevity. This is an excellent secret to share. This is how we should practice wholesome Dharma. We are discussing this here as well. Now, what is the most important point? As we have noted, the illness of Bodhisattvas arises from great compassion. Thus, within the realm of sentient beings, it should be said that a Bodhisattva's illness is actually caused by their great compassion. I hope everyone will remember this sentence. In our daily lives, when we see high monastics, great masters, or anyone we consider to be a realized Bodhisattva falling ill, we should realize that they do not possess truly real self-driven karma. Instead, they are manifesting illness. As the Mahaparinirvana Sutra states, Bodhisattva Mahasattvas have no karma to fall into hell, but for the sake of sentient beings, they generate great vows and are born in hell. A Bodhisattva Mahasattva has no inherent cause to fall into the hells. However, because of their compassion and the power of their vows, they still choose to take birth there. By the same logic, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva does not share the karma of ordinary worldly beings. They do not have the karma that causes illness. But through the power of their vows and their compassionate mind directed towards sentient beings, they manifest illness. It is very important that we often reflect on this point. I have only recently begun to think about this myself. In the past, I traveled to many countries with His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche. I was fortunate enough to have frequent contact with him. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok often took medications, including sleeping pills at night. He frequently took 1 or 2 pills of Western medicine. Sometimes his stomach would bother him. He was consistently taking a Western medicine called Weishuping. He also took many other medications like this on a regular basis. At the time, I did not think much of it. I thought, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok is in poor health and takes Western medicine frequently. Western medicine is quite detrimental. Why doesn't he take better care of his health? I had many discriminating thoughts. But looking back now, there must have been a very profound, deeper intention. As we said, the illness of bodhisattvas arises from great compassion. This was the focus of the previous passage. This addresses the cause of illness. Moving forward, today's content involves 2 or 3 more questions. One question is, why is everything surrounding the layman Vimalakirti empty? He asks, why is it empty? Additionally, he had no servants at that time. He asks, why are there no servants? And there is one more question. In today's teaching, there is also the question, what characteristics does your illness have? These are the 3 questions Manjushri Bodhisattva asked him. We can analyze other matters in our next session as well. I wonder if we can fully explore these 3 questions today. Regarding the first point mentioned earlier about the cause of your illness or when you will recover, we have already completed the explanation for that question. That concludes one section of the discussion. Next, Manjushri Bodhisattva asks, retired scholar, why is this room empty? And why are there no servants? In fact, in some translated versions, these are treated as 2 separate questions. One is, Vimalakirti, why do you have no servants? And the other is, why is your residence completely empty? Vimalakirti had long since prepared everything. The room was entirely empty with no attendants present. He had told his attendants, all of you must go out as I have an important guest arriving. Please step outside and stay far away for now. I will notify you once they have left. I will use the call button at that time. I am just joking. At that time, Manjushri asked those 2 questions. Vimalakirti answers the first question for him. He says, my room here is completely empty. Not only is my room empty, but in reality, both the physical world and the world of sentient beings are entirely empty. This includes all the Buddha realms and the lands of the Buddhas. The environments and beings within them are all completely empty as well. You see, the question he was just asked was, why is there no one in your room? It appeared that his room contained absolutely nothing. There was only a single bed and no people at all. Where did everyone go? Why is it empty? But Vimalakirti often answers questions in this manner. We can also adopt this approach in the future. When someone says something, we can respond from a different perspective. For example, if someone asks, how is your body today? You might respond, are you referring to the Dharma body, the enjoyment body, or the emanation body? It would be good for us to respond this way more often. Observe how the original question was simply, why is your room empty and without servants? That was a very ordinary question. However, Vimalakirti answered from the standpoint of the Dharma. He stated that all the countries of the Buddhas are also entirely empty. Then Manjushri continues by asking, with what was it emptied? Why is it empty, and how was it emptied? Because Manjushri had previously noted that the room was empty of people. Ultimately, the discussion shifted to a much larger scale, suggesting that the entire land of the Buddha is also empty. Actually, regarding this concept of emptiness, it seems that in Chinese, English, and many other languages, there is a specific nuance in how it is explained. It might give people the impression of something that actually exists. In reality, that is not an ideal understanding. Take the Tibetan word stong panid, for example. Regarding stong panid, what thoughts should it naturally bring to mind? If all dharmas are empty in their essential nature, then this term is used correctly. In stong panid, stong pa means empty. Naid carries the sense of ness, or the nature of emptiness. The nature of emptiness is itself also empty. This concept is relatively straightforward. However, some Western scholars today view emptiness as something vague or insubstantial. Not long ago, I visited a school in Eswatini. After our class, one of their teachers commented, "I used to believe that Buddhist emptiness was entirely nihilistic. But after hearing your talk today, it seems that this emptiness is not nihilism at all. Even now, many people in the West think emptiness means either that everything is completely void and nothing exists, which they call emptiness, or another group, including people in the Han region, looks at the form and characteristics of the Chinese character for empty. Because the top part is the cave radical and the bottom is the character for work, it represents a hole dug out by human effort. This can lead to the feeling that something exists on the outside while the inside is empty. The exterior is perceived as real, while the interior is void. In its earliest usage, it was related to the Kong of Confucius, meaning a small hole or opening. With this kind of conceptual background, we naturally develop the idea that emptiness is like a bowl with no water in it. Or we think that a room with no people in it is what emptiness means. This kind of concept exists. However, this understanding is not accurate. What we call emptiness is divided into apparent emptiness and actual emptiness. Apparent emptiness might be what we call mere emptiness in the Madhyamaka. In actual emptiness, even this concept of emptiness does not exist. This is the truly authentic meaning of emptiness. So we can explain it here. At that time, Manjushri asked, with what was it emptied? Why is it empty? How was it emptied? This was his question. At this point, Vimalakirti, the retired scholar, answers him, it was emptied with emptiness. What exactly makes it empty? Actually, it is empty due to the nature of emptiness, because its own essential nature is itself empty. Consider why the world of vessels was described as empty earlier. The world of vessels is empty by its own essential nature. It is empty because the essential nature is empty. It is empty through its own nature. It is not that some other dharma comes along to destroy it and make it non-existent. Therefore, our current understanding of emptiness really benefits from the teachings of the great masters of the past. The analytical methods of Madhyamaka are very important. So what he says here is that it was emptied with emptiness. If it was emptied with emptiness, then he proceeds to ask further. Manjushri Bodhisattva asks, how can emptiness use emptiness? It was just stated that it is empty through emptiness. So if it is empty through emptiness, how can we truly know this emptiness? Regarding emptying with emptiness, if something is already empty by itself, is it still necessary to apply emptiness to it? If it is already empty, why does this emptiness still need to be emptied? Is not the essential nature of the world of vessels already empty? If the nature is already empty, why would there be a need for emptiness? Vimalakirti answers the question this way. It is empty through non-discriminating emptiness. What makes it empty? It is not made empty by using some external tool. True emptiness is realized through the non-discriminating wisdom of noble ones. That is the only way to reach actual emptiness. It is penetrated through the non-discriminating wisdom of noble ones. As we know, regarding the true emptiness of all things in the world, our current ordinary mental consciousness cannot necessarily grasp that its essential nature is emptiness. But if we possess the wisdom of noble ones, then it is truly empty at that moment. This is just like what is taught in the Samadhi-Raja Sutra. If the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body truly existed, then who would the noble path benefit? If our senses were valid cognizers, what use would the noble path be? Only non-discriminating wisdom can truly penetrate this. Then Manjushri asks, can emptiness be discriminated? He continues to inquire, does this non-discriminating emptiness involve discrimination? Does this non-discriminating wisdom, this emptiness, have any discrimination? The answer provided below is that discrimination is also empty in its essential nature. If its essential nature were not empty, this Dharma could not be established. So non-discriminating wisdom is also empty in reality. Actually, this method of analysis is explained in great detail in the wisdom chapter of the Way of the Bodhisattva and in the root stanzas of the Middle Way. It is discussed with a high degree of precision there. Up to this point, we have moved through the layers to reach non-discriminating wisdom. What we call our subjective wisdom is itself empty. Its own essential nature is also emptiness. Manjushri Bodhisattva continues to ask questions. It is much like when children ask questions about the world. How big is this world and why is it so big? Where is the sun and why does it shine? And who knows that it is shining? They keep asking one question after another. The same thing is happening here. It started with, why is there no one in your room? Then the topic of emptiness was gradually developed until it reached the level of the noble ones. Actually, Manjushri Bodhisattva is very skilled at asking questions. He is very good at it. I am not sure about the questioning skills of our Dharma friends. I once met a Westerner who was the most talented person at asking questions I have ever known. Around the year 2013, I was in frequent contact with this Westerner. The way he asked questions was quite remarkable. Every time he raised a point, it would inevitably lead to a discussion of some profound principles. Asking questions is truly very important. It reflects a person's level of understanding. It might even be more difficult than answering them. He then asks about this emptiness, the non-discriminating wisdom mentioned earlier. This is the wisdom of emptiness that realizes the ultimate truth. Where should emptiness be sought? Vimalakirti, the retired scholar, answers, it should be sought within the 62 views. Of course, there are different ways to explain these 62 views. Among these views, there is the view of self-existence, the view of extremes, and wrong views. The first can also be called the view of the body, or the view of a self. These include the view of self-existence, the view of extremes, wrong views, the view of rigid adherence to precepts, and the view of attachment to views. In our study of the Abhidharmakosha, all of these views, collectively, it seems that each kind of view has various sub-views. That comes to 60 views in total. Then we add the view of permanence and the view of annihilation to those 60. This results in the 62 views. According to the Mahaprajnaparamita Sastra, it seems many other commentaries also use this explanation. In the Mahaprajnaparamita Sastra, our 5 aggregates exist across the past, future, and present. The 5 aggregates are categorized into views of the past and views of the present. When each aggregate is multiplied by the 3 times, it would be 15 views in total. Then, each of these views is further divided. For example, they are categorized as permanent, non-permanent, both, or neither. By dividing them this way, each of the 15 views becomes 4. That gives us 15 multiplied by 4, which is 60. Then we add the view of permanence and the view of annihilation on top of that. Overall, what is the nature of this view of emptiness? It is sought within the 62 views. The text does not say to abandon all these views first to obtain it. It is not explained that way. It is like the saying that afflictions are themselves bodhi. It is sought within the 62 views. Manjushri Bodhisattva asks again, where should the 62 views be sought? Vimalakirti further answers, they should be sought within the emancipation of the Buddhas. By cutting off wrong views, one attains liberation. It is found within that state of realization. He continues to ask, where should the emancipation of the Buddhas be sought? Then Vimalakirti, the retired scholar, answers, it should be sought within the mental processes of all sentient beings. This is because the mental processes of sentient beings are currently in a state of bondage. However, if we penetrate the nature of the mind and understand the nature of all conduct, then the mental processes of all sentient beings are actually unbound. So what is this view of emptiness relying on? It relies on the 62 views. And what do the 62 views rely on? The emancipation of the Buddhas. And what about the emancipation of the Buddhas? It leads back to the mental processes of sentient beings. And what are those mental processes? Ultimately, it is about recognizing the true nature. The nature of the mind is such that the wrong and the right share the same root. The wrong and the right have the same source. Some commentaries also explain it this way. Wrong and right spring from the same fundamental root. That is liberation. It is a natural attainment of liberation. This is quite deep, so I am not sure if we can fully grasp it yet. The point is that this view of emptiness is, as we often say, the highest view of Madhyamaka does not depart from the world. The principle here is very similar. Sometimes, however, we might misunderstand the idea that the Dharma does not depart from the world. When we apply profound Buddhist conduct and views to the level of human mental processes, confusion can sometimes occur. I will explain this to everyone in more detail when the time is right. That is one aspect of it. Moving on, this concludes the answer to why the room is empty. Then the text continues regarding your question about why there are no servants. I mentioned earlier that he actually asked two questions. The first was why the room is empty. The second was why he has no servants. Vimalakirti, the retired scholar, continues his answer. The text says, "All the host of Maras and followers of the heterodox paths are all my servants." So he is not without servants. He has plenty of them. All the Maras and heterodox practitioners are his servants. If someone asks you in the future if you have any servants, you can say that you do. When they ask who they are, you can say all the heterodox paths and Maras are your servants. Some of us might give the wrong answer. We might start naming specific people as our servants. That is not how it should be said. It should be the Maras and heterodox paths. Why put it this way? Because the host of Maras take pleasure in samsara, and the Bodhisattvas do not forsake samsara. The Maras enjoy it immensely, and they create all sorts of conditions to keep sentient beings trapped in the cycle of rebirth. This is the main work of the Maras. In reality, a Bodhisattva also follows along with the Maras. He stays among sentient beings and is unwilling to leave because he is constantly guiding them. So they share common ground. Each plays a part in the same space. The Maras prevent sentient beings from attaining liberation, while the Bodhisattvas are willing to dwell within samsara. This is one reason why he calls them servants. The translations in Tibetan and Sanskrit are slightly different. However, I will not go into those details now. As for the heterodox paths, they take pleasure in the 62 views mentioned earlier. But in reality, the Bodhisattvas are unmoved by these views. They neither cling to them nor abandon them. Master Seng Zhao says they do not forsake them. This is because they do not forsake sentient beings. They are also unmoved by these various views. Therefore, they are called servants. Vimalakirti, the retired scholar, has many attendants. Who exactly are these attendants? They are the host of Maras and followers of the heterodox paths. All of them are my servants, he says. As Buddhists, we sometimes find ourselves in similar positions. We should not simply abandon those who follow heterodox paths or the Maras. Instead, we should follow along with them. For instance, if I hold a very stable and correct view, then the various views of those on heterodox paths will not cause me to waver in the slightest. In that sense, I can call the heterodox practitioners my attendants. The demonic forces also have no negative influence over me. Yet they share many connections and commonalities with me. That is why I can say the Maras are my servants. For those of us whose practice has reached a certain level, we don't even have to look at it in terms of Maras. You can even consider difficult or malicious people as your retinue. This is because they can no longer affect your inner peace. This aligns with the profound teachings of Mahayana Buddhism. So that addresses the question about whether he has attendants. Let us continue a little further. That was the second question. Now we come to the final question. This is our last question for today's session. Manjushri Bodhisattva asks, do you have attendants? We have already covered that. Why is this room empty? We have also answered that. That part is finished. Now he says, the main reason I came was to ask about your illness. What characteristics does your illness have? It seems a bit confusing. Are you actually ill or not? One moment you say you are ill because sentient beings are ill. The next moment you say your servants are all demonic forces. Manjushri Bodhisattva appears to be slightly perplexed. What exactly is the nature of your illness? What characteristics does your illness have? What does it look like? Could you describe the appearance of your illness to me? Then Vimalakirti, the retired scholar, explains, my illness is without form, invisible. The illness he has no shape or color and cannot be perceived. Master Seng Zhao notes that without conditions there are no characteristics, because it arises from great compassion that is non-referential. In such a state there are no fixed forms. Without form it is naturally invisible. When asked if he is truly ill and what that illness looks like, he replies that it is formless. This doesn't apply only to Vimalakirti. Actually, every one of our illnesses is ultimately without form. Even when a specific area is extremely painful, you cannot actually see or touch the pain itself. It can be described as formless. It is invisible. You cannot see it, but you certainly feel it. Sometimes when we are very sick, the pain is quite intense. He continues to ask, is this an illness of body or of mind? He wants to know how it is categorized. Is it a physical ailment or a mental one? People today suffer from both. In the 21st century, mental illnesses are becoming more common. He answers that it is not of the body. Why? Because the body transcends characteristics. The body itself is empty and free from all conceptual elaborations. Our body is merely a composition of minute particles. When analyzed deeply, the body itself cannot be inherently established. If the body isn't established, how could illness be? So we cannot say it is joined with the body, nor is it an illness of the mind. The mind is like a phantom or an illusion and is also not inherently established. Since the mind's own nature cannot be established, how could it be joined with illness? What he is discussing here concerns the core questions. He is looking at the location and the essential nature of illness. There are many other detailed explanations for this. We won't go into all of them today. We can observe this when we fall ill ourselves. Is the illness physical or mental? If it were in the mind itself cannot be grasped. The past, present, and future mind cannot be found, so it cannot truly exist there. As for the body, we can observe it down to indivisible particles. Recall the sutra we read yesterday. When you observe this way, nothing is there. Yet, the pain can be so intense that one might consider ending their life. That person mentioned that feeling, didn't they? It is the same with anger. If we analyze it from various angles, we see that aversion cannot be inherently established. But when we are truly angry, it feels as though it is surging within us. It feels uncontrollable and unbearable. This is because our practice may still be weak. If one's practice is very strong, then whether it is illness or aversion, one can counteract the afflictions through long-term cultivation. He says that this illness cannot exist in either the body or the mind. That addresses the question about the location of the illness. Next, let's look at the nature of the illness. To which of the four elements does this illness belong? Manjushri Bodhisattva asks again, of the four elements of earth, water, fire, and air, to which does it belong? Among these four, which one is the source of your illness? Is it the element of fire? Is it water or air? Which one is it? Vimalakirti answers him, this illness is not of the earth element, but neither does it transcend it. It is not of the water element, but neither does it transcend it. It is not of the fire element, but neither does it transcend it. It is not of the wind element, but neither does it transcend it. In some versions, the space element is also mentioned. That makes 5, earth, water, fire, wind, and space. The illnesses of sentient beings arise from these 4 elements. From the perspective of ultimate reality, when we observe from the ultimate point of view, when we analyze the 4 elements, an illness within the nature of earth, water, fire, or wind is not established. Nor is an illness apart from the nature of these 4 elements established. In fact, the illness of beings is entirely tied to these elements. Our bodies are composed of nothing other than these elements. But if you analyze each element individually, nothing can be found. Is there any kind of illness that exists apart from the 4 elements? No, that cannot be found either. So in manifestation, the illnesses of beings arise from the 4 elements. I once read a text called the Sutra of the Buddha's teaching to the 5 kings. Among those 5 kings, one of them had faith. Eventually, all 5 kings took refuge in the Buddha. If one element is out of balance, 101 illnesses arise. If all 4 are out of balance, 404 illnesses appear. This means if one of the elements, such as earth, water, fire, or wind, is out of sync, then 101 different illnesses will appear. And if all 4 of our elements are out of balance, then the full 404 illnesses will all manifest. Therefore, the illnesses of beings are indeed related to the 4 elements. These internal illnesses are also connected to our own minds. Therefore, the illness of sentient beings is connected to my illness. Therefore, the illness of sentient beings is connected to my illness, and their illness is also linked to the 4 elements. So, in manifestation, illness does truly exist. But this is still somewhat different from Vimalakirti's illness, because Vimalakirti's illness is the illness of all sentient beings. As for our own illness, we all know what that is like. Sometimes when other beings are ill, we might feel happy, and then our own illness seems better. If you have a difficult relationship with someone, and you hear that they are sick, you might feel especially joyful. Does that ever happen? I hope none of us have such a negative heart. We should wish to share in the illness of sentient beings. If they are not ill, then I am not ill. But some are unhappy when others are healthy. That is not a good state of mind. All right, we will stop here for today. Sonam Dei Prancha Bhagaya Tonani
jana bashi jirgana jirano chukai chupun tsulen drowa sho
Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye